The divorce papers hit Eleanor's chest before she could swallow her food. Margaret Ashford had thrown them across the Thanksgiving table like garbage, knocking over Eleanor's wineglass, splattering red across the white tablecloth. "Sign it," Margaret said. "Take your $75,000 and get out of my house." Jonathan didn't even look up. He was holding Vanessa Crawford's hand under the table. His ex-girlfriend. The woman Eleanor had just discovered sitting in her seat. 4 years of marriage. 4 years of silence. 4 years of lies. They thought Eleanor was a nobody. A museum worker. A mistake. They didn't know her father owned half of America. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Eleanor stared at the divorce papers in her lap. Red wine soaked through the first page, blurring the words "dissolution of marriage." Around her, the Thanksgiving table had gone silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of anticipation. They had been waiting for this moment. "Well," Margaret Ashford tapped her fingernails against her champagne glass. "Pick up the pen, Eleanor. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Eleanor looked at her husband. Jonathan Ashford sat 3 seats away, his hands still intertwined with Vanessa Crawford's. He was staring at his plate, jaw tight, refusing to meet Eleanor's eyes. "Jonathan," Eleanor said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Look at me." He didn't move. "Jonathan." "Just sign the papers, Eleanor." His voice was flat, rehearsed. "It's over." "Look at me when you say that." Finally, Jonathan raised his head. His eyes were cold, empty. The eyes of a stranger. "It's over," he repeated. "It's been over for a long time. You don't belong here. You never did." Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. Not break. Crack. Like the first fracture in ice before the whole lake collapses. 4 years, she whispered. 4 years, Jonathan. "I gave up everything for you." "You gave up nothing," Margaret cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You had nothing to give up. A little job at a museum, a little apartment in Boston. You should be thanking us for the education we provided. 4 years of living in luxury, eating our food, wearing clothes we paid for." "I bought my own clothes, Margaret." "From outlet stores." Margaret's lip curled with disgust. "Which is exactly my point. You're not one of us, Eleanor. You never were. You're a schoolteacher's daughter from nowhere, and my son made a mistake when he married you. Tonight, we're correcting that mistake." Eleanor looked around the table. Bethany, Jonathan's younger sister, was filming everything on her phone, a smirk playing at her lips. Mr. Patterson, the family lawyer, sat at the far end, pretending to study his napkin. And Vanessa Crawford, beautiful, blonde, wearing a red dress that cost more than Eleanor's car, was watching with barely concealed delight. "How long?" Eleanor asked quietly. "How long what?" Jonathan frowned. "How long have you been sleeping with her?" The question landed like a bomb. Vanessa's smile faltered. Jonathan's face went red. "That's none of your—" "6 months," Vanessa interrupted smoothly. She squeezed Jonathan's hand and looked directly at Eleanor. "We reconnected at the Hartford Charity Gala in May. You remember that night, don't you, Eleanor? Jonathan came home late. He said the traffic was terrible." Eleanor remembered. She remembered waiting up until midnight. She remembered Jonathan coming through the door smelling like perfume she didn't own. She remembered asking if everything was okay, and he had snapped at her to stop being so clingy. 6 months, Eleanor repeated. "I was going to tell you," Jonathan said, though his voice held no conviction. "I was waiting for the right time." "The right time," Eleanor laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "And Thanksgiving dinner with your ex-girlfriend sitting in my chair. That's the right time?" "Don't be dramatic, Eleanor." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "This is business." The Ashford family needs alliances with the right people. Vanessa's father is a senator. Her family has connections that could save our company. What do you bring to the table? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I brought love, Eleanor said quietly. I thought that mattered. Love. Margaret spat the word like it was poison. Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Love doesn't secure mergers. Love doesn't keep this family from bankruptcy. Eleanor turned to Jonathan. Is that what I was? A placeholder until someone better came along? Jonathan finally met her eyes. For a moment, just a moment, Eleanor saw something flicker there. Guilt, maybe, or shame. Then it was gone. You were a mistake, Jonathan said. I was young and stupid, and I thought I wanted something different. But I was wrong. I need someone who understands my world, someone who can stand beside me, not behind me. I stood beside you for 4 years, Jonathan. I nursed you when you broke your leg skiing. I held your hand when your father died. I stayed up with you every night for 3 months when you lost the Singapore deal. And I gave you a roof over your head, Jonathan interrupted coldly. A cottage on the estate, food, clothing, medical insurance. You were compensated, Eleanor, fairly. Compensated. Eleanor stared at him. I was your wife, not your employee. There's not much difference, is there? Margaret smiled. Now sign the papers. The car is waiting to take you to the bus station. Greyhound leaves for Boston at 11. You can be home by morning. Eleanor looked down at the divorce papers in her lap. The wine stain had spread, bleeding through multiple pages. Dissolution of marriage was barely legible now. $75,000. That was her price tag. 4 years of her life reduced to a number. What if I don't sign? Eleanor asked. Margaret's smile widened. She nodded at Bethany. Bethany turned her phone around, showing Eleanor the screen. It was a photograph, blurry, grainy, but unmistakable. Eleanor standing outside a coffee shop with a man, their heads close together, his hand on her arm. Recognize him? Margaret asked sweetly. That's David, my former colleague from the museum. I ran into him by accident 3 months ago. Did you? How convenient. Margaret took the phone from Bethany and studied the image. It looks rather intimate to me. 2 people standing very close, having what appears to be a secret meeting. It wasn't secret. It wasn't intimate. We talked for 10 minutes about a restoration project. That's not what this photograph shows, Margaret set the phone down. And that's certainly not what the tabloids will say when we release it tomorrow morning. Eleanor's blood went cold. You wouldn't. Unfaithful wife cheats on Ashford heir. Margaret recited the headline like she had already written it. The press will have a field day. Your reputation will be destroyed. You'll be lucky to get a job cleaning toilets when we're done with you. That photograph proves nothing. It doesn't have to prove anything, dear. It just has to suggest. And we control the narrative. We own 3 newspapers. We have friends at every major network. By this time tomorrow, you'll be the most hated woman in Connecticut. Eleanor looked at Jonathan. You're going to let her do this? Jonathan shrugged. Sign the papers, Eleanor. Take the money. Walk away quietly. It's the smart play. The smart play. Eleanor's hands were shaking now, not with fear, but with something else. Something that had been building inside her for 4 years. That's what this is to you? A play? Everything is a play, Eleanor. Business, marriage, family. It's all just strategy. And you, Jonathan gestured vaguely at her, you were never part of the long-term strategy. You were a detour, an experiment, and the experiment is over. Eleanor stood up slowly. The divorce papers fell to the floor. Pick those up, Margaret snapped. Eleanor didn't move. She was looking at her husband, really looking at him, maybe for the first time. The man she had loved. The man she had given up everything for. The man who had systematically erased her from his life while she was too blind to see it. "I'm not signing anything," Eleanor said. The temperature in the room dropped. "Excuse me?" Margaret's voice was ice. "You heard me. I'm not signing your papers. I'm not taking your $75,000. And I'm not going to the bus station." "Then you'll leave with nothing." Margaret stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "You'll be ruined, destroyed. I will make it my personal mission to ensure you never work again, never date again, never show your face in decent society again." "Decent society," Eleanor laughed softly. "Is that what you call this? A woman who threatens her daughter-in-law at Thanksgiving dinner. A son who cheats on his wife for 6 months and then serves her divorce papers between the turkey and the pie. A family that thinks $75,000 is a fair price for 4 years of someone's life?" Eleanor shook her head. "This isn't decent society, Margaret. This is a pit of snakes wearing designer clothes." "How dare you!" "I'm not finished." Eleanor's voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze, even Margaret. "For 4 years, I cooked your meals. I cleaned up your messes. I smiled at your insults and swallowed your cruelty. Because I loved your son. Because I believed, stupidly, naively, that love was enough." She picked up her wine glass, the one that hadn't been knocked over. She drained it in one long swallow. "But you taught me something tonight, Margaret. You taught me that kindness is weakness, that love is currency, that the only thing that matters in your world is power." Eleanor set the glass down. "So let me tell you something about power." "Eleanor," Jonathan started. "Shut up, Jonathan." Eleanor didn't even look at him. Her eyes were locked on Margaret. "You think I'm nobody, a museum worker, a school teacher's daughter. You've spent 4 years making sure I knew exactly how worthless I was. But here's the thing, Margaret. You never once asked about my family. You never wondered why I was so vague about my father. You never questioned any of it." "Why would I care about your father?" Margaret scoffed. "He's probably a plumber or a—" "He's William Harrington." The name landed like a nuclear bomb. Margaret's face went white. Jonathan's hand slipped out of Vanessa's. Even Mr. Patterson, the family lawyer, looked up from his napkin. "William?" Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "William Harrington? The William Harrington?" "The William Harrington," Eleanor confirmed. "Harrington Global Industries, media, technology, real estate, shipping." She paused, letting the words sink in. "He owns half of Manhattan, Margaret. He has more money in his checking account than your entire family has in total assets. And he's been waiting 4 years for me to call him." "That's impossible." Margaret shook her head violently. "You're lying. You're a nobody. You work at a museum." "I worked at a museum because I wanted to. Because I love art. Because I wanted to build a life that wasn't defined by my father's money." Eleanor grabbed her coat from the back of her chair. "I walked away from billions, Margaret. Billions. Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had." She looked at Jonathan. His face was gray, his mouth hanging open. "I thought you loved me, Jonathan. I thought if I could just prove that I was worth loving without the money, without the name, without all of it, I thought that would mean something." Eleanor's voice cracked, just for a moment. Then she steadied it. "But you never loved me at all, did you? I was just convenient. Someone to cook and clean and wait quietly in the guest cottage while you lived your real life." "Eleanor, wait!" Jonathan stood up, reaching for her. "If what you're saying is true, we can work this out. We don't have to—" "Don't touch me." Eleanor stepped back. You just served me divorce papers, Jonathan. You've been sleeping with your ex-girlfriend for 6 months. And now that you know who my father is, suddenly you want to work things out? I didn't know. Exactly. Eleanor's voice was quiet now, but it carried the weight of 4 years of silence. You didn't know. And it shouldn't have mattered. But it does matter to you, doesn't it? That's all that matters. The money, the name, the power. That's all you ever cared about. She walked to the door. Eleanor, please. It was Margaret now, her voice completely changed, soft, pleading, desperate. Let's not be hasty. We're family. We can discuss this like civilized. You threw divorce papers at my chest, Margaret, in front of your guests, on Thanksgiving. Eleanor opened the door. Cold November air rushed into the room. We're not family. We never were. She stepped outside into the darkness. The door slammed shut behind her. Eleanor made it to the end of the driveway before her legs gave out. She collapsed against an old oak tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The cold air burned her lungs. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry were streaming down her face now, freezing on her cheeks. 4 years. 4 years of pretending. 4 years of hoping. 4 years of slowly dying inside. It was over. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold it. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the one name she had promised herself she would never call. Dad. Her finger hovered over the button. For 4 years, she had refused to use this phone. She had refused to call him. She had wanted to prove, to herself, to the world, to the ghost of her dead mother, that she could make it on her own. That she didn't need the Harrington name. That she didn't need the billions. She had wanted to be loved for herself. And look what that had gotten her. Eleanor pressed the call button. It rang once. Twice. Hello? The voice that answered was deep, gravelly, commanding. The voice of a man who made presidents nervous and CEOs sweat. But underneath the power, there was something else. Something tired. Something lonely. Daddy, Eleanor said. It's me. Silence. Then, Ellie? Sweetheart, is that you? No one had called her Ellie in 4 years. The sound of her childhood nickname broke something inside her. It's me, Daddy. I'm in Connecticut, at the Ashford estate. The Ashford, his voice sharpened. What happened? Are you hurt? Not physically. Eleanor wiped her face with the back of her hand. But Daddy, you were right. You were right about everything. What did they do? The warmth vanished from William Harrington's voice, replaced by something cold, something dangerous. They served me divorce papers at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of everyone. Silence. They tried to buy me off with $75,000. They threatened to destroy my reputation with fake photographs. They told me to take a Greyhound bus back to Boston. More silence. The kind of silence that preceded storms. 75,000, her father repeated slowly. They tried to buy off a Harrington for $75,000. They didn't know, Daddy. They never knew. I never told them. No. His voice softened slightly. No, you didn't. Because you wanted to be loved for yourself. I remember. He sighed. I told you it was a mistake, Ellie. I told you that people like them, they only understand one language. I know. Eleanor's voice broke. I know you did, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I wasted 4 years. I'm sorry. Stop. Her father's voice was firm but gentle. You don't apologize to me. You never apologize to me. You made a choice. You followed your heart. That's not something to be sorry for.
But I failed, Daddy. I wanted to prove that love was real, that it could exist without money or power or... And I failed.
You didn't fail, sweetheart. They failed you. There's a difference. William Harrington took a long breath. Now tell me what you want. Eleanor looked back at the Ashford mansion. Through the windows, she could see figures moving, arguing. Margaret was probably already on the phone, trying to verify Eleanor's story. Jonathan was probably panicking. Vanessa was probably making excuses to leave.
I want them to feel what I felt, Eleanor said quietly. I want them to know what it's like to be powerless, to be humiliated, to be treated like garbage.
That can be arranged.
I don't want them dead, Daddy. I don't want them physically harmed, but I want them to lose everything. Everything. The house, the company, the social status. I want them to feel exactly what they made me feel tonight.
Done. The word was simple, final, absolute. Stay where you are, Ellie. I'm sending the helicopter. It'll be there in 40 minutes. Her father paused. And, sweetheart?
Yes?
By the time you land in New York, the Ashford family will understand exactly who they threw away. And they will spend the rest of their lives regretting this night. The call ended. Eleanor stood there in the cold, looking up at the stars. For the first time in 4 years, she felt something other than sadness. She felt power. 40 minutes later, the thump, thump, thump of helicopter blades filled the air. A massive black Sikorsky descended onto the Ashford lawn, its searchlights cutting through the darkness like the eyes of an angry god. Inside the mansion, Eleanor could see faces pressed against the windows, watching in horror. She straightened her coat. She wiped her face. She walked toward the helicopter with her head held high. The side of the aircraft bore a logo in gold letters: Harrington. As Eleanor climbed aboard, she took one last look at the house where she had spent 4 years being erased.
Goodbye, Jonathan, she whispered.
The helicopter rose into the night sky, carrying Eleanor Harrington toward her destiny. Below, the Ashford family watched in stunned silence as their world began to collapse. They had thrown away a wife. They were about to discover they had awakened an empire. The helicopter touched down on the rooftop helipad of Harrington Tower at exactly 11:47 p.m. Eleanor stepped out into the cold Manhattan wind, her simple navy dress whipping against her legs. She hadn't changed. She hadn't had time. She still had wine stains on her sleeve and mascara streaks on her cheeks. A man in a black suit was waiting for her. Marcus, her father's head of security. She hadn't seen him in 4 years, but he looked exactly the same. Tall, silent, watchful. "Miss Harrington," he said, nodding. "Your father is waiting in the war room."
The war room? Eleanor almost laughed. It's Thanksgiving, Marcus.
Your father doesn't take holidays when family is threatened. Marcus gestured toward the elevator. "This way, please." Eleanor followed him across the rooftop. The Manhattan skyline glittered around her, millions of lights stretching to the horizon. She had grown up in this world, penthouses and private jets and power plays that shaped nations. She had walked away from all of it for love. What a joke. The elevator descended 60 floors in silence. When the doors opened, Eleanor found herself in a room she hadn't seen since she was 22 years old. The war room. It wasn't really a war room, of course. It was a conference center, equipped with screens covering every wall, direct lines to every major financial institution in the world, and a staff that worked around the clock, monitoring Harrington Global's interests across 6 continents. But her father had always called it the war room, because that's what business was to him. War. William Harrington stood at the head of the main table, his silver hair perfectly combed, his gray eyes sharp as flint. He was wearing a cashmere sweater and reading glasses, his casual look, but there was nothing casual about the energy radiating from him. "Ellie," he said softly. Eleanor ran to him. She hadn't hugged her father in 4 years. She had been so determined to prove her independence, so stubborn in her belief that she could build a life without him. But now, wrapped in his arms, feeling the solid warmth of him, she wondered why she had ever walked away. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered into his chest. "I'm so sorry." "No apologies." William held her tight. "You're home now. That's all that matters." He pulled back, holding her at arm's length, studying her face. "You look thin," he said. "Have they been feeding you?" Eleanor laughed through her tears. "I've been feeding them, actually. I spent the last 3 days cooking Thanksgiving dinner." William's jaw tightened. "You cooked for them?" "Margaret insisted. She said family helps each other." Eleanor's voice turned bitter. "Of course, she didn't consider me family. She just considered me free labor." "Tell me everything," William said, "from the beginning." So Eleanor told him. She told him about the 4 years of subtle humiliation, the guest cottage, the outlet store close, the way Margaret would introduce her to guests as Jonathan's little wife, with a dismissive wave. She told him about Jonathan's growing coldness, his late nights, his increasingly frequent business trips. She told him about Vanessa Crawford appearing at the dinner table, sitting in Eleanor's seat, holding Jonathan's hand like she belonged there. And she told him about the divorce papers, the $75,000, the threat to destroy her reputation. By the time she finished, William Harrington's face had turned to stone. 75,000, he repeated quietly. My daughter, my only child. And they tried to buy her off for $75,000? They didn't know who I was, Daddy. That makes it worse. William walked to the window, looking out at the city he had helped build. That means they treat everyone like this. Anyone they consider beneath them. Anyone without the power to fight back. He turned to face her. But you do have the power to fight back, Ellie. You always did. You just chose not to use it. I know what you wanted. William's voice softened. You wanted love. Real love. The kind your mother and I had. He sighed. I never blamed you for that. I was angry, yes. Hurt that you walked away. But I understood. Your mother would have understood too. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears again at the mention of her mother. Catherine Harrington had died when Eleanor was 19. A sudden heart attack that had shattered both Eleanor and her father. It was her mother who had taught Eleanor to value kindness over cruelty, love over power. It was her mother who had made Eleanor believe that money wasn't everything. Mom would have hated them, Eleanor whispered. Your mother would have destroyed them. William smiled grimly. She had a temper, your mother. She hid it well, but when someone hurt the people she loved... He shook his head. God help them. He walked back to the conference table and pressed a button. The screens on the wall flickered to life, displaying financial data, corporate structures, news feeds. Now, William said, let's talk about the Ashford family. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor learned exactly how powerful her father had become in the 4 years she had been away. Harrington Global Industries now controlled interests in media, technology, real estate, shipping, and finance across 43 countries. Her father sat on the boards of 6 major corporations. He was a confidant to presidents and prime ministers. His word could move markets. And he had been quietly, patiently, keeping tabs on the Ashford family The entire time Eleanor had been married to Jonathan.
You watched them?
Eleanor asked, stunned. I watched over you, William corrected. I had people monitoring the situation, making sure you were safe, making sure they weren't... He hesitated. I wanted to intervene, Ellie, so many times. When I heard about the way Margaret treated you, when I found out they put you in a guest cottage like a servant, I wanted to burn them to the ground.
Why didn't you?
Because you asked me not to. William met her eyes. You asked me to let you live your own life, to let you succeed or fail on your own terms. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I respected your wishes. Eleanor felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over her. Her father had spent 4 years watching her suffer, unable to help, because she had been too proud to ask. I'm asking now, she said quietly. William nodded. Then let's begin. He pulled up a corporate diagram on the main screen. Ashford Holdings was displayed at the center, with dozens of subsidiary companies branching out like a diseased tree. The Ashford family empire, William explained, is built on shipping and real estate. It was founded by Jonathan's great-grandfather in 1923 and has been slowly declining ever since. The current generation, Jonathan and his mother, have accelerated that decline through mismanagement, vanity projects, and spectacular bad judgment.
How bad is it?
They're leveraged to the hilt. The shipping division is losing money every quarter. The real estate holdings are mortgaged 3 times over. The only thing keeping them afloat is a pending merger with Crawford Industries, Senator Crawford's family company.
Vanessa's father,
Eleanor said. Exactly. The Crawfords are providing capital and political connections. In exchange, Jonathan was supposed to marry Vanessa and unite the families. William paused. Which means your marriage was always an obstacle to them. They were just waiting for the right moment to remove you. Eleanor felt sick.
So the whole thing was planned? The divorce? Vanessa showing up at dinner?
Almost certainly. Margaret has been in contact with Senator Crawford for months. They've been negotiating the merger and the marriage behind your back. And Jonathan knew? Jonathan did what his mother told him. He always has. William's voice dripped with contempt. The man is a coward and a fool. He could have had everything. A wife who loved him, a connection to the Harrington Empire, a chance to turn his failing company around. Instead, he chose to be his mother's puppet. Eleanor stared at the screen, at the web of companies and connections that had shaped her life for 4 years without her knowing. How do we destroy them? She asked. William smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The Ashford family's finances depend on 3 things, he said. Credit lines from major banks, investment partners for the Crawford merger, and Senator Crawford's political support. He tapped the screen. We eliminate all 3.
Can you do that?
I can do it in a phone call. William picked up a secure line. But I want you to understand something, Ellie. Once I make this call, there's no going back. The Ashfords will lose everything. Their company, their homes, their social standing. They'll be ruined. Eleanor thought about the divorce papers, the wine stain on her dress, the way Jonathan had looked at her, like she was nothing, like she had never mattered at all. Make the call, she said. William dialed. Thomas, he said into the phone. It's William Harrington. I need you to pull all credit lines associated with Ashford Holdings, immediately. Yes, I know it's Thanksgiving. I don't care. I want it done in the next 30 minutes. He hung up and dialed again. Senator Crawford, William Harrington, I think we need to have a conversation about your daughter's involvement with the Ashford family. I have some information you might find interesting, about where the Ashford money actually comes from. No, it can't wait until morning. Check your email. I'll hold. Eleanor watched as her father made call after call to bankers, lawyers, investors, journalists. Each call was brief, precise, devastating. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make threats. He simply stated facts and issued instructions, and people scrambled to obey. By 2 a.m., the first domino fell. "Sir," Marcus entered the room holding a tablet. J.P. Morgan just announced they're suspending all credit facilities to Ashford Holdings, effective immediately. They're citing irregularities in financial documentation. "Good," William said. "What about Goldman?" "Pulled out of the merger negotiations 20 minutes ago. They released a statement saying they're reassessing their strategic partnerships." "And the senator?" Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "Senator Crawford's private jet left Connecticut at 1:47 a.m. He's flying back to Washington. His office released a statement saying he has no current business relationship with the Ashford family." Eleanor stared at the tablet. "He abandoned them? Just like that?" "Politicians are survivors," William said. "Crawford knows which way the wind is blowing. He's not going to hitch his wagon to a sinking ship." "What about Vanessa?" "Still at the Ashford estate, as far as we know. Probably trying to figure out what happened." William checked his watch. "Give it another hour. By sunrise, the Ashford family will be completely alone." Eleanor walked to the window. The Manhattan skyline was still glittering, indifferent to the drama playing out in its shadows. Somewhere out there, in a Connecticut mansion, her husband was watching his world collapse. Her husband. No, her soon-to-be ex-husband. "Daddy," she said quietly, "I don't want to just destroy them." William raised an eyebrow. "You've changed your mind?" "No, I want to destroy them, but I want more than that." Eleanor turned to face him. "I want them to work for me." "Work for you?" "You said their company is failing. What if we bought it, took it over completely?" William studied her for a long moment. "That would require a significant investment, and the shipping industry is notoriously difficult." "I don't care about the shipping industry. I care about justice." Eleanor's voice hardened. "They treated me like a servant for 4 years. They made me cook their meals and clean their messes and smile at their insults. And then they tried to throw me away like garbage." She walked back to the conference table. "I want them to feel what I felt. I want Margaret answering phones and fetching coffee. I want Jonathan mopping floors. I want them to wake up every morning knowing that the woman they threw away now owns everything they ever had." William was silent for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. "Your mother was right about you," he said. "What do you mean?" "She always said you were soft on the outside, but steel on the inside. She said someday someone would make the mistake of pushing you too far, and God help them when that happened." William picked up the phone again. "God help the Ashfords." By sunrise, Harrington Global had acquired a controlling stake in Ashford Holdings. The purchase was hostile, swift, and absolute. With their credit lines frozen, their investors fleeing, and their political allies abandoning ship, the Ashford family had no leverage to resist. The stock price had cratered overnight, and William's team had scooped up shares at pennies on the dollar. Eleanor watched the financial news on the war room screens. The anchors were already speculating about what had happened, how a century-old shipping company had collapsed in a single night. "Anonymous sources suggest financial irregularities," one anchor said, "but others are pointing to a mysterious buyer who acquired nearly 60% of the company's shares in a matter of hours." "The identity of the buyer remains unknown," another anchor added, "but industry insiders are calling this one of the most aggressive corporate takeovers in recent memory." Eleanor's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Jonathan. 12 missed calls. As she watched, it buzzed again. A text message this time. Eleanor, please call me. Something terrible has happened. I don't understand what's going on. Please. She deleted the message without responding. Another buzz. Another message. I made a mistake. I know that now. We can work this out. Please, just call me. Delete. Eleanor, I'm begging you. The banks are calling in our loans. The investors are pulling out. I don't know what's happening, but please, if you had anything to do with this, please stop. I'll give you anything you want. Eleanor stared at that last message for a long time. Anything you want. She typed back a single response. I want you to suffer. Then she blocked his number. Ellie! Her father's voice was gentle. The legal team is ready. We need to discuss what happens next. Eleanor turned away from the phone. The sun was rising over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a new day. What happens next, Eleanor said, is that we make them an offer they can't refuse. 3 days later, Eleanor stood in the lobby of Harrington Tower, waiting. She had spent the last 72 hours preparing for this moment. She had slept only a few hours, fueled by coffee and adrenaline, and something darker, a cold, patient fury that had been building inside her for 4 years. She was no longer wearing the outlet store dress. She was wearing a white Valentino power suit that cost more than Jonathan's car. Her hair was sleek and perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like what she was, the sole heir to one of the largest fortunes in America. The elevator doors opened. The Ashford family stepped out. They looked like refugees from a disaster zone. Margaret's designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, or both. Jonathan was unshaven, his face gray with exhaustion and fear. Even Bethany looked rattled, clutching her phone like a security blanket. They stopped when they saw Eleanor. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret stepped forward. Eleanor, she said, and her voice was completely different now, soft, pleading, desperate. Eleanor, there's been some terrible misunderstanding. We're family. We can— We're not family, Eleanor interrupted calmly. You made that very clear on Thanksgiving. You said I was a mistake. You said I didn't belong. You said I should take a Greyhound bus back to Boston. I didn't mean— You meant every word. Eleanor gestured toward the conference room. This way, please. We have business to discuss. She led them into the glass-walled room where her father's legal team was already assembled. 7 lawyers in identical dark suits, each one representing a different aspect of the Ashford family's destruction. William Harrington sat at the head of the table. He didn't stand when the Ashfords entered. He didn't offer them seats. He simply watched them with the cold, patient gaze of a predator who had already caught his prey. Sit, Eleanor said. It wasn't a request. The Ashfords sat. Let me explain your situation, Eleanor began, pacing slowly around the table. As of this morning, Harrington Global Industries owns 63% of Ashford Holdings. Your credit lines have been frozen. Your investors have fled. Your political allies have abandoned you. The SEC is investigating irregularities in your financial reporting. Irregularities that could result in criminal charges. Those charges are baseless, Jonathan protested weakly. Are they? Eleanor picked up a folder and dropped it in front of him. Inflated asset values, unreported offshore accounts, suspicious transfers to shell companies in the Caymans. She leaned close to him. Your mother has been cooking the books for years, Jonathan. Did you know that? Or were you too busy sleeping with your ex-girlfriend to pay attention? Jonathan's face went white. He looked at his mother. Margaret said nothing. Here's what's going to happen, Eleanor continued. You have 2 choices. Option 1.
We turn these documents over to the SEC, the FBI, and the IRS. The investigation will take years. Your assets will be frozen, your reputation will be destroyed, and at the end of it, Margaret will almost certainly go to prison. Prison? Margaret's voice was a whisper. Federal prison. For fraud, tax evasion, and securities violations. Eleanor smiled coldly. I hear the food is terrible, and the thread count on the sheets is even worse.
What's option 2? Jonathan asked. Eleanor picked up another folder and slid it across the table. Option 2. You sign these contracts. Jonathan opened the folder. His hands were shaking. He read the first page, then the second, then the third. His face grew progressively paler. This is an employment contract, he stammered. Yes. You want us to work for you? I want you to work for my company. Specifically, I want you to work in the positions I've outlined in those documents. Eleanor pointed to the relevant sections. Margaret, you'll be working as a receptionist in our Connecticut office, answering phones, greeting visitors, fetching coffee. Margaret made a choking sound. Jonathan, you'll be working in building maintenance, cleaning, minor repairs, taking out the trash. Eleanor paused. Ironic, isn't it? You tried to throw me away like garbage. Now you'll be the one handling it. You can't be serious, Jonathan said. I'm completely serious. These positions come with a salary, minimum wage, of course, and basic health insurance. You'll work 40 hours a week, just like everyone else. You'll report to supervisors who will evaluate your performance. And if your performance is unsatisfactory, you'll be terminated. And if we refuse? Margaret asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Then I send these files to the federal authorities, and you spend the next 20 years in prison. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. It's your choice, Margaret. You can answer phones for my company, or you can answer questions for the FBI. Which would you prefer? The room was silent. Jonathan looked at his mother. Margaret looked at the contracts. Bethany looked at her phone, as if hoping the internet might offer some escape. This is revenge, Margaret finally said. This is petty, vindictive revenge. Yes, Eleanor agreed. It is. And you know what? I don't care. You spent 4 years making my life miserable. You treated me like dirt. You humiliated me in front of your guests. You tried to destroy my reputation with fake photographs. And then you threw divorce papers at me on Thanksgiving and offered me $75,000 to disappear. She stood up and walked to the window. I wanted to be a good wife, Margaret. I wanted to be part of your family. I wanted to be loved. Her voice hardened. But you taught me that love is weakness, that kindness is stupidity, that the only thing that matters in your world is power. She turned to face them. So here's power, Margaret. Here's what power looks like. I own you now. I own your company, your homes, your future. And you're going to spend the rest of your lives working for the woman you threw away like garbage. Margaret's face crumpled. For the first time since Eleanor had known her, the formidable matriarch of the Ashford family began to cry. Please, Margaret whispered. Please, Eleanor. We made a mistake. We were wrong about you. But please, don't do this. We'll give you anything. We'll apologize publicly. I don't want your apologies. Eleanor's voice was ice. I want justice. And justice means you feeling exactly what you made me feel. She picked up a pen and held it out to Margaret. Sign the contract, Margaret, or go to prison. Those are your only options. Margaret looked at the pen. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. Mom, don't, Jonathan said. We can fight this. We can find lawyers.
With what money, Jonathan? Margaret's voice was hollow. We have nothing. Everything is gone. Everything. She took the pen. She signed the contract. Jonathan watched his mother's signature dry on the page. Then, slowly, he picked up his own pen. I loved you, he said quietly, looking at Eleanor. In the beginning, I really did love you. No, you didn't, Eleanor replied.
You loved the idea of someone who would always be grateful, always be lesser, always be beneath you. But I was never beneath you, Jonathan. You just couldn't see it.
Jonathan signed the contract. Bethany signed without a word. When the last signature was dry, Eleanor gathered the documents and handed them to her father's legal team. Congratulations, she said to the Ashfords. You start Monday. Don't be late. I hear the new management doesn't tolerate tardiness. She walked out of the conference room without looking back. Behind her, she could hear Margaret sobbing. Jonathan's stunned silence. The rustle of lawyers gathering documents. Eleanor stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished metal. She looked powerful, confident, untouchable. She also looked exhausted. The elevator rose in silence. When it reached the penthouse, Eleanor walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. She had won. She had crushed the people who had hurt her. She had taken everything from them. So why did she feel so empty? Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Proud of you, Ellie. Your mother would be proud too. Eleanor closed her eyes. She had wanted love. She had found vengeance. Maybe, eventually, she would find peace. But not today. Today she had a company to run, a family to rebuild, a future to create. And the Ashfords had floors to mop. 3 months had passed since the Ashfords signed their contracts, and Eleanor had learned something important about revenge. It was exhausting. She sat in her corner office on the 52nd floor of Harrington Tower, reviewing quarterly reports for Ashford Holdings, now a subsidiary of Harrington Global. The numbers were improving. She had cut the waste, fired the incompetent executives, and brought in people who actually knew how to run a shipping company. But the satisfaction she had expected to feel never came. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. The Ashfords arrived for their shift. Margaret complained about the coffee maker again. Eleanor almost smiled. Almost. Margaret Ashford had been working as a receptionist at Harrington's Connecticut office for 12 weeks now. According to the supervisors, she was terrible at the job. She couldn't figure out the phone system. She forgot to pass along messages. She insulted visitors who didn't meet her standards of proper dress. But she showed up every day. She had no choice. Jonathan was worse. He had been assigned to building maintenance, mopping floors, emptying trash cans, fixing broken toilets. The man who had once worn bespoke suits and driven a Porsche now wore a gray jumpsuit with his name stitched on the pocket. The first week, he had tried to quit 3 times. Each time, Eleanor's lawyers reminded him of the alternative, federal prison. He stopped trying to quit after that. Eleanor's intercom buzzed. Miss Harrington, your father is here to see you. Send him in. William Harrington entered the office, looking concerned. That was unusual. Her father never looked concerned. We have a problem, he said without preamble. What kind of problem? William sat down across from her desk. Vanessa Crawford. Eleanor tensed at the name. She hadn't thought about Vanessa in weeks. After Senator Crawford had abandoned the Ashfords on Thanksgiving night, Vanessa had disappeared from the public eye. Eleanor assumed she had retreated to Europe or the Caribbean, licking her wounds in luxury. What about her? She's back in New York,
And she's been meeting with people. Dangerous people.
What do you mean, dangerous?
William pulled out his phone and showed Eleanor a photograph. It was a surveillance image, grainy, taken from a distance, showing Vanessa sitting across from an older man in what looked like a private restaurant. "That's Victor Chen," William said. "He runs a hedge fund that specializes in hostile takeovers. He's ruthless, unethical, and very, very good at what he does." Why would Vanessa be meeting with him? Because Victor Chen hates me. William's voice was grim. We had a dispute 15 years ago. He tried to acquire a company I wanted, and I outmaneuvered him. Cost him about $200 million. He's never forgiven me. Eleanor studied the photograph. Vanessa was smiling, that same fake sweet smile she had worn at the Thanksgiving dinner. But there was something else in her expression now. Something hungry. "You think she's planning something?" "I know she's planning something. Vanessa Crawford is not the type to accept defeat. Her family lost their merger deal because of us. Her father's political reputation took a hit, and she personally was humiliated when her boyfriend's wife turned out to be a Harrington. She wasn't humiliated. She was sitting in my chair, holding my husband's hand, and now that husband is mopping floors." William leaned forward. "Vanessa is a Crawford. She grew up in politics. She understands revenge, and she understands patience. Whatever she's planning, it won't be impulsive. It'll be calculated." Eleanor thought about this. She'd been so focused on the Ashfords that she had forgotten about Vanessa. That was a mistake. "What do you think she's going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I've got people watching her. In the meantime, you need to be careful. Don't give her any ammunition." "What kind of ammunition?" William hesitated. "The Ashford situation. Making them work as servants. It's satisfying, I understand that. But it's also visible. It makes us look vindictive." "We are vindictive." "Yes, but we don't need to advertise it." William stood up. "Just be careful, Ellie. Vanessa Crawford is more dangerous than the Ashfords ever were. Margaret was a bully, but Vanessa is a strategist. Don't underestimate her." After her father left, Eleanor sat in silence for a long time. She had been so certain that destroying the Ashfords would bring her peace. Instead, she had just created more enemies. Her phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on your victory. Enjoy it while it lasts." Eleanor stared at the message. No signature, no explanation. She blocked the number and went back to work. But the unease stayed with her all day. 2 weeks later, Eleanor attended her first major public event since Thanksgiving, the Global Maritime Summit at the Javits Center. It was the biggest industry conference of the year, attracting shipping executives, government officials, and media from around the world. Eleanor was scheduled to give the keynote address on ethical leadership in modern business, a speech her PR team had spent weeks crafting. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was giving a speech about ethics while her former in-laws scrubbed toilets for minimum wage. "You look nervous," her father said as they walked through the backstage area. "I'm not nervous. I'm cautious." Eleanor adjusted her earpiece. "You said Vanessa was planning something. What better place to strike than here, in front of 3,000 industry leaders?" "Security is tight. We have people everywhere." "That doesn't make me feel better." William squeezed her shoulder. "You've got this, Ellie. Just focus on the speech. Let my team worry about Vanessa." Eleanor nodded, but the knot in her stomach didn't loosen. The auditorium was massive, a sea of faces stretching back into darkness. Eleanor stood at the podium, looking out at 3,000 people who were waiting to hear what she had to say. She took a breath and began. "Good afternoon. My name is Eleanor Harrington, and I want to talk to you today about what it means to lead with integrity." The words flowed easily. She had practiced the speech 100 times. She talked about transparency, accountability, the importance of treating employees with respect. She talked about her vision for Ashford Holdings, now Harrington Maritime, and the changes she had implemented. The audience seemed engaged. People were nodding. A few were even taking notes. Then, 15 minutes into the speech, the screens behind her flickered. Eleanor paused. She turned to look at the massive display that had been showing her presentation slides. The slides were gone. In their place was a document, blown up 40 feet high, impossible to miss. It was a bank statement, a wire transfer. Harrington Global Industries to Ashford Holdings. $47 million. Eleanor's blood went cold. The screen changed again. Another document. This one was a contract, an employment agreement for Jonathan Ashford, complete with a humiliating job description. The audience began to murmur. Another document appeared. Internal emails from Eleanor to her father. I want them to suffer. I want them to feel exactly what they made me feel. The murmuring grew louder. Eleanor stood frozen at the podium, watching her private communications broadcast to 3,000 people. Ladies and gentlemen, a voice boomed through the speakers. You've been listening to Eleanor Harrington talk about ethical leadership. But let me show you what ethical leadership really looks like to the Harrington family. The screen changed to a video. It was surveillance footage, grainy but unmistakable, showing Margaret Ashford being berated by a supervisor for forgetting to refill the coffee pot. Margaret was crying. The supervisor was pointing at her, shouting. This is what the Harringtons do to people they don't like, the voice continued. They don't just beat them in business. They humiliate them. They degrade them. They turn them into slaves. Eleanor finally found her voice. Turn it off, she shouted to the technicians. Turn it off now! But the screens wouldn't respond. The system had been hijacked. More footage appeared. Jonathan Ashford mopping a floor while employees walked past, ignoring him. Bethany answering phones with tears streaming down her face. Eleanor Harrington likes to talk about ethics, the voice said. But she's just a bully with a bigger bank account. She didn't destroy the Ashfords because they wronged her. She destroyed them because she could. The audience was in chaos now. People were standing up, talking over each other. Cameras were flashing. Reporters were scrambling for the exits, already composing their headlines. Eleanor gripped the podium, her knuckles white. She looked for Vanessa Crawford in the audience. She couldn't find her, but she knew that Vanessa was behind this. Security finally cut the feed. The screens went dark, but the damage was done. Eleanor stood alone on the stage, surrounded by the wreckage of her carefully constructed image. The aftermath was brutal. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Cable news, social media, every major newspaper in the country ran the story. Harrington heiress caught in revenge scheme against former in-laws. The narrative was devastating. Eleanor wasn't the wronged wife who had fought back. She was the vindictive billionaire who had used her power to torture innocent people. Innocent? Eleanor slammed her hand on her father's desk. They're not innocent. They served me divorce papers on Thanksgiving. They tried to destroy my reputation with fake photos. They treated me like garbage for 4 years. I know, William said calmly. But that's not what the story says. The story says you bought their company and forced them to work as janitors. The story says you sent emails about wanting them to suffer. Those emails were private. Not anymore. William turned his computer screen toward her. Twitter is calling you the Ice Queen. There's a hashtag trending. Hashtag Justice for Ashfords. Justice for... Are you kidding me? They're the villains. They were the villains. Now, you're the villain. William's voice was gentle but firm. Perception is reality, Ellie. And right now, the perception is that you're a monster. Eleanor sank into a chair. Her head was pounding. What do I do? First, we find out how Vanessa got access to those emails and surveillance footage. Someone on our team is leaking information. And then? Then, we figure out how to spin this. We need to get your side of the story out there, the real story. The divorce papers, the threats, the years of abuse. Will anyone believe it? William was silent for a moment. Some people will, others won't. The court of public opinion is unpredictable. He reached across the desk and took her hand. But we'll get through this, Ellie. We always do. Eleanor wanted to believe him. But for the first time since Thanksgiving, she felt afraid. The investigation took 2 weeks. Marcus and his team combed through every employee, every contractor, every person who had access to Eleanor's private communications. They found the leak on a Tuesday afternoon. It was Patterson, Marcus reported. The Ashford family lawyer. He was still on payroll as a consultant. He had access to the internal systems. Patterson? Eleanor remembered the man from Thanksgiving, the bulldog-faced attorney who had sat quietly while the Ashfords humiliated her. Why would he do this? Money. Vanessa Crawford paid him $500,000 for the documents. Marcus handed her a folder. We traced the wire transfer. She didn't even try to hide it. Eleanor opened the folder. Bank records, phone logs, a complete trail leading directly to Vanessa Crawford. We can prosecute, Marcus said. Industrial espionage, theft of confidential information. She'll face serious charges. Eleanor stared at the documents. 2 months ago, she would have jumped at the chance to destroy Vanessa the way she had destroyed the Ashfords. She would have made the call without hesitation. But now she wasn't sure. What would happen to her? Eleanor asked quietly. Best case, she gets a plea deal and does a few years in minimum security. Worst case, she fights it and loses, and spends a decade in federal prison. A decade. For one act of revenge. Eleanor thought about the videos that had played at the summit. Margaret crying over a coffee pot. Jonathan mopping floors in a gray jumpsuit. The hashtag. Hashtag Justice for Ashfords. Was that really who she had become? Someone who destroyed people so completely that even her enemies look like victims? What if we didn't prosecute? Eleanor said slowly. Marcus frowned. I'm sorry? What if we dealt with this differently? Without lawyers, without courts, without more public humiliation? Miss Harrington, with respect, Vanessa Crawford tried to destroy your reputation. She violated multiple federal laws. I know what she did. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window. But I've been thinking about something my father said. Perception is reality. Right now, the perception is that I'm a bully, that I use my power to crush people. That's not. It's exactly what I've been doing. Eleanor turned to face him. I made the Ashfords work as janitors because I wanted them to suffer, not because it served any business purpose, not because it was justice, because I wanted revenge. Marcus was silent. And you know what? It didn't make me feel better. It didn't heal anything. It just made me into someone I don't recognize. Eleanor picked up the folder with Vanessa's information. If I prosecute Vanessa, the cycle continues. She'll spend years in prison, plotting revenge. When she gets out, she'll come after me again. And we'll keep destroying each other until there's nothing left. So what do you propose? Eleanor thought for a long moment. Set up a meeting, she said finally. Just me and Vanessa, no lawyers, no security. Just 2 women having a conversation.
Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he simply nodded. "I'll make the arrangements." The meeting took place 3 days later, in a private room at the St. Regis Hotel. Eleanor arrived first. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no power suit, nothing to intimidate. She wanted this conversation to be honest. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes late, probably on purpose. She was wearing white, as if to emphasize the contrast between. Her smile was as fake as ever. "Eleanor," Vanessa said, sliding into the chair across from her. "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to want to chat. I thought you'd be sending federal agents to my door. I considered it, but you didn't. Why?" Eleanor studied the woman across from her. Beautiful, wealthy, ruthless. In another life, they might have been friends. "Because I'm tired," Eleanor said honestly. "I'm tired of the war. I'm tired of revenge. I'm tired of waking up every morning and wondering who's trying to destroy me today." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "That's not what I expected from the Ice Queen." "The Ice Queen," Eleanor smiled bitterly. "Is that who I am now? A character in a tabloid story? You made yourself that character. You took a family that wronged you and you ground them into dust. What did you think would happen? I thought I would feel better. I thought justice would feel satisfying. And does it?" Eleanor shook her head. "No. It feels empty. It feels like I lost a piece of myself that I'll never get back." For the first time, something shifted in Vanessa's expression. The fake smile faded, replaced by something more complex. "I know that feeling," Vanessa said quietly. "Do you?" "My father spent my entire childhood teaching me that power is everything, that you have to crush your enemies before they crush you, that kindness is weakness and mercy is stupidity." Vanessa's voice was bitter. "And you know what I learned? I learned that when you live like that, you end up alone. You have allies, not friends, transactions, not relationships. You win every battle, but you lose yourself." Eleanor hadn't expected this. She had expected Vanessa to gloat, to threaten, to continue the war, not to confess. "Then why did you do it?" Eleanor asked. "The summit, the leaked documents, all of it." "Because you humiliated me." Vanessa's eyes flashed with old anger. "You didn't just beat me. You took the man I was supposed to marry and turned him into a janitor. You made sure everyone knew that I had lost to you, that I was the runner-up. Jonathan was never yours to marry. He was my husband. A husband who was planning to propose to me that night. Did you know that? He had the ring in his pocket, a 5-carat diamond. Margaret had picked it out." Vanessa laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And then you made one phone call, and it all disappeared. The merger, the marriage, everything I had been working toward for years. So you came back for revenge." "I came back to prove that I wasn't someone you could just sweep aside." Vanessa leaned forward. "I came back to show you that you're not invincible, that there are consequences for crushing people." "And now?" "Now?" Vanessa sat back. "Now I'm tired too. I spent 6 months planning that attack. I hired hackers, bribed lawyers, coordinated with Victor Chen. And for what? A few days of bad headlines? You're still standing. You're still powerful. I didn't change anything." They sat in silence for a moment. Two women who had spent months trying to destroy each other, both exhausted by the effort. "What do you want, Eleanor?" Vanessa finally asked. "Why did you really call this meeting?" Eleanor had been thinking about this question for days. She still wasn't sure she had the right answer. "I want to end this," she said. "Not with lawyers or prosecutions or more revenge. I want to actually end it. Walk away. Move on with our lives." "Just like that?" "It won't be just like that. There will need to be terms, conditions, guarantees that neither of us will attack the other again." Eleanor paused.
but I believe we can reach an agreement, if we both want to." Vanessa studied her for a long moment. "You could destroy me," she said slowly. "You have evidence of multiple felonies. You could send me to prison for years. Why aren't you?" "Because I've already destroyed enough people, and it hasn't made me happy." Eleanor met Vanessa's eyes. "I don't want to be the Ice Queen, Vanessa. I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting wars. I want to build something good." "How very noble." "I'm not trying to be noble. I'm trying to survive." Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "I walked away from my family 4 years ago because I wanted to be loved for myself. I wanted to prove that I didn't need the money or the power or any of it. And you know what happened? I got crushed anyway. The Ashfords didn't care about who I was. They just saw someone weaker than them. And now you're not weaker." "No, now I'm stronger. But being strong doesn't mean I have to be cruel." Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a document. "This is a mutual non-aggression agreement. We both sign it and we both walk away. No prosecution. No more attacks. Clean slate." Vanessa took the document. She read through it slowly, her expression unreadable. "You're really willing to let me go?" she asked. "I'm willing to stop the cycle. The question is whether you are." Vanessa was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, softer, more human. "My father is going to be furious." "Do you care?" "I used to." Vanessa picked up a pen from the table. "I used to care about a lot of things that don't seem important anymore." She signed the document. Eleanor signed it after her. For a moment, they just sat there, two enemies who had chosen peace over destruction. "What are you going to do now?" Vanessa asked. "I don't know. Rebuild my reputation, probably. Figure out who I am when I'm not fighting." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Maybe start dating again. It's been a while." "Dating," Vanessa almost laughed. "I've forgotten what that's like. Every relationship I've had has been strategic." "That sounds lonely." "It is." Vanessa stood up to leave. She hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Eleanor, I'm sorry. Not for wanting revenge. I think I earned that. But for the way I went about it. The public humiliation. The attack on your character. That was—" She searched for the right word. "That was cruel, and you didn't deserve it." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. We're not friends. We'll probably never be friends." Vanessa's old smile flickered back, but this time there was something almost genuine in it. "But maybe we can be something better than enemies." She walked out of the room. Eleanor sat alone for a long time after she left. The war was over. The Ice Queen had melted. But the hardest part was still ahead, figuring out who she was going to be now. That night, Eleanor did something she hadn't done in months. She called her father and told him she was taking a week off. "A week?" William sounded concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Dad. I just need some time to think." "Think about what?" "About who I want to be." Eleanor looked out her window at the Manhattan skyline. "I've spent the last 3 months destroying people. Now I need to figure out how to build something instead." William was quiet for a moment. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said finally. "Would she?" "She always said that true strength isn't about crushing your enemies. It's about knowing when to stop fighting." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. "I miss her, Dad." "I know, sweetheart. I miss her too." After she hung up, Eleanor walked to her closet. In the back, behind the designer clothes and the power suits, was a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were photographs. her mother's jewelry, a first-edition book of poetry that Catherine Harrington had given Eleanor on her 16th birthday, and a letter. Eleanor had read this letter 100 times, but she read it again now. My darling Ellie, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but I want you to know something important. You are going to face people who try to make you hard. People who tell you that kindness is weakness and love is foolish. They will hurt you, and you will want to hurt them back. When that happens, remember this. The world has enough hardness. What it needs is people brave enough to stay soft. Be brave, my darling. Be soft. Be kind. And never forget that you are loved. Mom. Eleanor held the letter to her chest and cried. She cried for her mother, for the 4 years she had wasted on Jonathan, for the person she had become in her pursuit of revenge. And then, slowly, she began to imagine who she might become instead. Eleanor spent her week off in the most unlikely place she could think of, a small bed and breakfast in Vermont, run by an elderly couple who had no idea who the Harringtons were. For 7 days, she didn't check her email. She didn't watch the news. She didn't think about the Ashfords or Vanessa Crawford or the empire waiting for her back in Manhattan. Instead, she read books. She took long walks through the snow-covered woods. She sat by the fireplace and drank hot chocolate and let herself feel, for the first time in months, something other than anger. On the 6th day, she made a decision. She called her father. I want to release the Ashfords from their contracts, she said. William was silent for so long that Eleanor thought the call had dropped. Dad? Are you there? I'm here. His voice was careful, measured. Can you explain your thinking? I've been replaying everything in my head. The divorce papers, the revenge, making them work as janitors. Eleanor stared out the window at the falling snow. And I keep coming back to something Mom wrote in her letter. She said the world has enough hardness. What it needs is people brave enough to stay soft. Your mother was an idealist. She was right. Eleanor's voice was firm. I wanted to hurt them, Dad. I wanted them to suffer the way I suffered. And I succeeded. But it didn't heal anything. It just made me into someone Mom wouldn't recognize. The Ashfords treated you terribly, Ellie. They deserved consequences. Maybe they did. But consequences and cruelty aren't the same thing. Eleanor took a breath. I've been cruel. I made Margaret answer phones just so I could watch her cry. I made Jonathan mop floors just so I could feel powerful. That's not justice. That's torture. William was quiet for another moment. What exactly do you want to do? I want to end the employment contracts. Let them go. They can find their own jobs, their own lives. The federal charges stay dropped. We already agreed to that. But I don't want to own them anymore. And the company? Harrington Maritime? We keep it. We've already turned it around. It's profitable now, employing 3,000 people who had nothing to do with what Margaret and Jonathan did to me. Eleanor smiled slightly. That's the legacy I want, not revenge. Building something good from something broken. You've thought about this carefully. I have. William sighed, but Eleanor could hear something like pride in his voice. All right, he said. I'll have the lawyers draw up the paperwork. The Ashfords will be free by the end of the week. Thank you, Daddy. Don't thank me. This is your decision, and I think it's the right one. He paused. Your mother would be proud of you, Ellie. I know I say that a lot, but it's true. She would be so proud. Eleanor hung up and cried again. But this time, the tears felt different. They felt like healing. Eleanor returned to Manhattan on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, she was back in her office, but something had shifted. The anger that had driven her for months was gone, replaced by something quieter, something that felt almost like peace. Her first meeting was with the HR director for Harrington Maritime. "I want to make some changes," Eleanor said. The director, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, nodded nervously. Everyone in the company had been walking on eggshells since the summit scandal. "What kind of changes, Miss Harrington?" "First, I want to end the employment contracts for the Ashford family, effective immediately. Full severance packages, no conditions." Patricia's eyebrows shot up. "You're letting them go? After everything?" "After everything." Eleanor folded her hands on her desk. "I also want to establish a foundation. We'll use the proceeds from the Ashford estate sale, whatever hasn't already been liquidated, to fund scholarships for first-generation college students. Kids from families like the one the Ashfords thought I came from." Patricia was writing furiously. That's very generous, Miss Harrington." "It's not generous. It's necessary." Eleanor stood and walked to the window. "I spent 4 years being told I was worthless because I didn't come from money, because I worked in a museum instead of inheriting a shipping company. And when I finally revealed who I really was, I used my power to punish people instead of to help them." She turned back to face Patricia. "I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to use what I have to lift people up, not push them down." Patricia nodded slowly. "I'll get started on the foundation paperwork right away." "Thank you, Patricia." Eleanor hesitated. "And I'm sorry." "Sorry? For what?" "For the last few months. I know I've been difficult. I've been angry and demanding and probably terrifying to work for." Eleanor smiled ruefully. "I'm going to try to be better." Patricia stared at her for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled back. "We all have bad seasons, Miss Harrington. What matters is what we do when the season changes." The news that Eleanor had released the Ashfords spread quickly. Some people praised her for showing mercy. Others criticized her for being weak. The tabloids couldn't decide whether she was a reformed villain or a pushover. Eleanor didn't care. She was too busy rebuilding. 3 weeks after returning from Vermont, she received an unexpected visitor. "Miss Harrington," her assistant said over the intercom, "there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's personal." "Who is it?" "He says his name is Daniel Mitchell. He says you'll know who he is." Eleanor frowned. The name didn't ring any bells. "Send him in." The man who entered her office was not what she expected. He was in his late 30s, with kind eyes and slightly messy hair. He was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, not the power suit she was used to seeing in this building. "Miss Harrington," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me." "Do I know you?" "Not exactly." He smiled nervously. "I'm a veterinarian. I run a small clinic in Brooklyn, and about 6 months ago, you anonymously donated $50,000 to help us stay open." Eleanor blinked. She had forgotten about that donation. It had been during her darkest period, right after she had made the Ashfords sign their contracts. She had been feeling guilty and had thrown money at various charities to make herself feel better. "I remember," she said slowly. "The animal shelter that was about to close." "That's the one." Daniel's smile grew warmer. "Your donation saved us. We were 3 weeks away from having to shut down and find homes for over 200 animals. Because of you, we're still open. We've actually expanded." Eleanor didn't know what to say. This was the first time someone had thanked her for something in months. "You didn't have to come all the way here to tell me that," she managed. "Actually, I did. Because I wanted to invite you to see what your money built." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "We're having an open house next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just hot dogs and lemonade,
and a lot of grateful animals. I thought maybe, if you're not too busy, you might want to come see it." Eleanor looked at the card. The address was in a part of Brooklyn she had never visited. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "I'm not really—" "Not really what? A dog person?" Daniel laughed. "Everyone's a dog person. They just don't know it yet." Despite herself, Eleanor smiled. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I ask." Daniel headed for the door, then paused. "You know, I read about you in the papers. All that stuff with the Ashfords and the scandal at the summit." Eleanor tensed. Here it comes, she thought. The judgment, the criticism. "I thought you were incredibly brave," Daniel said. "Brave?" Eleanor stared at him. "I made people scrub toilets for revenge. That's not brave. That's vindictive."
"Sure, that part wasn't great," Daniel shrugged. "But then you stopped. You let them go. You started a scholarship foundation. You admitted you were wrong and tried to do better." He met her eyes. "Most people never admit they're wrong, Miss Harrington. Most people just keep doubling down on their mistakes. The fact that you chose a different path, that takes courage." He smiled one more time and left. Eleanor sat at her desk for a long time after he was gone, turning his card over and over in her hands. She went to the open house. She told herself it was just to see how her donation had been used. Just professional curiosity. Just a quick visit. But the moment she stepped through the doors of the Brooklyn Animal Shelter, something shifted inside her. The shelter was chaos, in the best possible way. Dogs were barking, cats were meowing, children were running around, chasing puppies and being chased by kittens. Volunteers were everywhere, serving hot dogs and answering questions and introducing potential adopters to animals looking for homes. "You came," Daniel said, appearing at her elbow. He was wearing a ridiculous apron that said, "I'm only here for the dogs." "I said I would think about it." "And you thought about it?" "I thought about it." Eleanor looked around. This is wonderful." "It is, isn't it?" Daniel's face lit up. "We've placed over 300 animals in the last 6 months. And we've started a program where we bring therapy dogs to nursing homes and hospitals. It's small stuff, but it makes a difference." "Small stuff can change the world," Eleanor heard herself say. Daniel looked at her with surprise and warmth. "That's exactly what I believe." They walked through the shelter together. Daniel introduced her to the staff, the volunteers, the animals. He showed her the new wing that her donation had funded, complete with a surgery suite and a recovery room. And he told her about himself. He had grown up in Ohio, just like the fictional version of Eleanor that the Ashfords had believed in. His parents had been teachers. He had worked his way through veterinary school on scholarships and part-time jobs. He had opened this shelter 5 years ago because he believed that every animal deserved a chance, no matter how broken or abandoned. "Kind of like people," he said, scratching a one-eyed cat behind the ears. "Everyone deserves a chance." Eleanor watched him with the cat. His hands were gentle. His voice was soft. He treated the animal with the same respect he would give a human being. She thought about Jonathan. Jonathan, who had never once asked about her day. Who had never looked at her the way Daniel was looking at this cat, with genuine care and attention. "Can I ask you something?" Eleanor said. "Sure. Why did you really invite me here? You could have just sent a thank you card." Daniel was quiet for a moment, still petting the cat. "Because I read about what happened to you," he said finally. "The Thanksgiving thing, the divorce papers, all of it. And I thought, here's someone who got hurt really badly, who hurt other people in response, and who's now trying to figure out how to heal." He looked up at her. "I've seen a lot of wounded animals, Miss Harrington. Dogs that bite because they're scared, cats that hide because they've been abused. And I've learned that the only way they heal is if someone shows them that kindness still exists, that not everyone is going to hurt them.
Are you calling me a wounded animal?
I'm calling you human, Daniel smiled. And I'm saying that maybe you could use a friend. Someone who doesn't want anything from you. Someone who just sees you. Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back.
You don't even know me.
No, but I'd like to. She didn't know what to say. She had spent so long surrounded by people who wanted her money, her connections, her power. The idea of someone who just wanted to know her, the real her, was almost impossible to believe. I'm not an easy person, she warned him. I work with traumatized pit bulls for a living. Daniel grinned. I think I can handle it. Despite everything, Eleanor laughed. They went for coffee after the open house, then dinner the following week, then a walk in Central Park the week after that. Daniel didn't care about her last name. He didn't care about her father's empire, or her penthouse apartment, or her designer clothes. He cared about whether she had read any good books lately. He cared about her opinion on the best pizza in Manhattan. He cared about the way she laughed at his terrible jokes. You're different from what I expected, Eleanor told him one evening as they sat on a bench watching the sunset over the Hudson River.
What did you expect?
I don't know. Someone who would be intimidated by me. Someone who would try to impress me. Why would I try to impress you? Daniel looked genuinely confused. I already impressed you. You came to my open house. Eleanor laughed. She had been laughing a lot lately. You know what I mean. Most people, when they find out who my father is, they change. They start calculating, figuring out how to use the connection. I don't need your connections. I've got a shelter full of animals and a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that I can barely afford. Daniel shrugged. I'm not interested in the Harrington Empire, Eleanor. I'm interested in you. Why? Because you're kind. Because you're trying to be better. Because you've been through something terrible, and instead of letting it destroy you, you're choosing to grow. He took her hand. And because when you smile, really smile, your whole face lights up. And I want to see that smile as often as possible. Eleanor looked at their intertwined hands. His were rough from work. Hers were soft from a lifetime of luxury. They shouldn't fit together, but somehow they did. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of trusting someone again. Of opening up and having it thrown back in my face. She thought about Jonathan, about the divorce papers, about all the ways she had been broken. I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do anything, Daniel said gently. We can just be. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other. That sounds too simple. Maybe simple is exactly what you need. Eleanor looked at him, really looked at him, at his kind eyes and messy hair and ridiculous optimism, at the man who had walked into her office to thank her for a donation she had barely remembered making. Maybe simple was exactly what she needed. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay, let's just be. Daniel smiled. It was the warmest thing she had seen in years. 3 months later, Eleanor faced her final test. She was sitting in her office when her assistant buzzed through. Miss Harrington, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent. Who is it? Jonathan Ashford. Eleanor's heart stopped. She hadn't seen Jonathan since the day he signed the employment contract. She hadn't spoken to him since the day she released him from it. She had assumed, hoped, that he had disappeared from her life forever. Should I send him away? Her assistant asked. Eleanor thought about it. She could refuse to see him. She could have security escort him out. She could pretend he didn't exist. But that would be the old Eleanor, the one who ran from difficult conversations. Send him in, she said. Jonathan Ashford looked terrible. He had lost weight. His hair was graying at the temples. His eyes, which had once been arrogant and cold, now looked hollow and lost. "Eleanor," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Jonathan?" He flinched at her tone. The old Jonathan would have snapped back. This Jonathan just looked down at his feet. "I came to apologize." Eleanor waited. "I know it doesn't mean anything," Jonathan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I can't undo what I did. The divorce papers, Vanessa, the way I treated you for 4 years." He finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "But I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry." "Why now? It's been almost a year." "Because I finally understand." Jonathan took a shaky breath. "After you released us from the contracts, I thought my life would go back to normal. I thought I could rebuild, but—" He laughed bitterly. "No one will hire me. No one will invest in me. The Ashford name is worthless now. Everyone knows what we did to you, and no one wants anything to do with us." "I didn't do that," Eleanor said quietly. "I stopped the revenge. I let you go. I know. But the damage was already done. And honestly, it's not your fault. It's mine." Jonathan sat down heavily in the chair across from her desk. "I spent my whole life believing I was special, that I deserved success just because of my name, my family, my connections. I never worked for anything. I never earned anything. And when you came along, this beautiful, kind, smart woman who actually loved me for me, I didn't appreciate it. I took you for granted. I let my mother control our marriage. I cheated on you with Vanessa because it was easier than standing up to my family." He was crying now. Eleanor watched him, unsure what to feel. "I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me," Jonathan said. "And I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life." Eleanor sat in silence for a long moment. A year ago, she would have enjoyed this. She would have savored every tear, every word of self-pity. She would have told him exactly what she thought of him and thrown him out of her office. But she wasn't that person anymore. "I forgive you," she said. Jonathan's head snapped up. "What?" "I forgive you." Eleanor stood and walked around the desk to stand in front of him. "Not because you deserve it, not because your apology changes anything, but because holding on to anger is exhausting, and I'm tired of being exhausted." "I don't understand." "You don't have to understand." Eleanor reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "This is a headhunter I've worked with. She specializes in second chances. Call her. Tell her I sent you." Jonathan stared at the card like it was a foreign object. "Why would you help me? After everything I did?" "Because I'm not the Ice Queen anymore, Jonathan." Eleanor smiled sadly. "I'm trying to be the person my mother wanted me to be. Someone who builds instead of destroys. Someone who heals instead of hurts." She opened her office door, a clear signal that the conversation was over. "Goodbye, Jonathan. I hope you find what you're looking for." Jonathan stood slowly. He walked to the door, then paused. "He's a lucky man," he said quietly. "Who?" "The guy you're dating. The veterinarian." Jonathan's smile was bitter, but genuine. "I saw the photos in the paper. You look happy." "I am happy." "Good," Jonathan nodded. "You deserve it, Eleanor. You always did. I was just too stupid to see it." He walked out without another word. Eleanor closed the door behind him. She stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, processing what had just happened. Then she picked up her phone and called Daniel. "Hey," he answered. "What's up?" "Nothing. I just wanted to hear your voice." "That's sweet. Also slightly concerning. Are you okay?" Eleanor laughed.
I'm better than okay. I just did something hard, and I survived it. What kind of something? I'll tell you at dinner.
Are we still on for tonight? Of course. I found this amazing Italian place in Brooklyn. Hole in the wall. Cash only. You're going to hate it. I'm going to love it. You're going to love it, Daniel agreed. Because it's with me. Eleanor hung up, still smiling. She walked to the window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. The same view she had looked at 100 times before, but somehow today it looked different. It looked like possibility. She thought about her mother's letter, about staying soft in a hard world, about being brave enough to choose kindness. She thought about the scholarship foundation she had started, about the animals at Daniel's shelter, about the 3,000 employees at Harrington Maritime who were building good lives because she had chosen to build something instead of destroy something. And she thought about Jonathan walking out of her office with a business card and a second chance he probably didn't deserve. Eleanor Harrington had spent a year learning how to be powerful. Now she was learning something harder. She was learning how to be good. 1 year later, snow was falling on Connecticut. Eleanor stood at the window of what had once been the Ashford estate, watching the white flakes drift down through the darkness. But the house behind her was unrecognizable from the cold monument to wealth she had known during her marriage. The ballroom that had once hosted Margaret's cruel dinner parties was now filled with laughter. 50 children from the Harrington Scholarship Foundation were gathered around a massive Christmas tree, tearing into presents while volunteers served hot chocolate and cookies. "You're doing that thing again," Daniel said, appearing at her side. "What thing?" "The thing where you stare out windows and look contemplative." He handed her a mug of cocoa. "It's very dramatic. Very billionaire heiress." Eleanor laughed. "I was just thinking about last year, about how different everything was." "Different bad or different good?" "Different everything." She turned to face him. Daniel was wearing a ridiculous Christmas sweater covered in cats wearing Santa hats. It was the ugliest thing she had ever seen, and she loved it. "A year ago, I was standing in this same house, being served divorce papers on Thanksgiving. And now you're giving away scholarships and dating the world's most handsome veterinarian. Most humble, too." "Humble is overrated." Daniel grinned. "Come on, the kids are about to do the talent show. Apparently, one of them taught their therapy dog to dance." They walked back into the ballroom together. Eleanor paused in the doorway, taking it all in. The transformation of the Ashford estate had been her idea, and her father's most expensive gift. Instead of selling the property, they had converted it into a retreat center for the Scholarship Foundation. Kids who had never left their neighborhoods could now spend summers and holidays here, learning to swim in the pool, reading in the library, dreaming bigger dreams than their circumstances might have allowed. The sign at the entrance read, "The Catherine Harrington Center for Young Scholars," named for Eleanor's mother, the woman who had taught her that kindness wasn't weakness. "Miss Eleanor! Miss Eleanor!" A small girl with bright eyes and braided hair came running up, clutching a stuffed dog. "Maya," Eleanor knelt down to the girl's level. "Are you having fun?" "The best fun ever! Look what Santa brought me!" Maya held up the stuffed animal. "His name is Biscuit, like the dog at Mr. Daniel's shelter." "That's a perfect name." "Mr. Daniel said the real Biscuit might be ready for adoption soon. He said maybe, if my mom says okay, we could give him a forever home." Maya's eyes were shining. "Do you think she'll say okay?" Eleanor looked at Daniel, who was trying very hard to appear innocent. "I have a feeling she might," Eleanor said. Maya squealed with joy and ran off to tell her friends. "You're adopting out dogs at a scholarship event?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "I'm creating opportunities for connection." Daniel shrugged. "Also, that kid has been asking about Biscuit for 6 months.
Her mom already said yes. We're surprising her on Christmas morning. You're impossible. Impossibly charming. Eleanor shook her head, but she was smiling. The talent show was a chaotic, wonderful mess. Kids sang off key. A magic trick went wrong in the most hilarious way possible. And yes, a golden retriever named Pickles performed a dance routine that mostly consisted of spinning in circles and barking. Eleanor sat in the front row, applauding for every act, feeling something warm spread through her chest. This was what she had wanted. Not revenge, not power. This, children laughing, families smiling, hope being planted in hearts that had known too much hardship. This was what her mother would have wanted. After the talent show, Eleanor slipped away to take a phone call. "Hi, Dad." "Ellie, how's the event going?" "It's perfect. The kids are having the time of their lives." "Good, good." William paused. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure you're okay." "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "It's been exactly a year since Thanksgiving. Since—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Eleanor looked out the window again. A year ago, she had walked down this same driveway in the snow, broken and alone, making a phone call that would change everything. "I'm okay, Dad," she said softly. "Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm happy." "You sound happy." William's voice was warm. "Your mother used to say that happiness was the best revenge. I never understood what she meant until now." "It's not revenge, Dad. It's moving on."
"There's a difference." "Yes, I think there is." He cleared his throat. "Well, I won't keep you. Enjoy your party. Tell Daniel I said hello."
"I will. Love you, Dad."
"Love you too, sweetheart." Eleanor hung up and stood there for a moment, letting the peace of the evening wash over her. "Hey," she turned. Daniel was standing in the doorway. "The kids are asking for you. Apparently you promised to read them a Christmas story?"
"I did promise that," Eleanor smiled. "I'll be right there."
"You okay?"
"I'm perfect."
Daniel studied her face for a moment. Then he crossed the room and took her hands in his. "Can I tell you something?" he asked.
"Always."
"When I first met you, in your office that day, I thought you were the saddest person I'd ever seen. You were surrounded by all that wealth, all that power, and you looked completely lost."
"I was lost."
"I know. But look at you now." Daniel squeezed her hands. "You found your way, Eleanor. You built something beautiful out of something broken. And I'm so proud of you." Eleanor felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. "You helped me find it," she said. "You and your ridiculous shelter and your terrible jokes. My jokes are excellent. Your jokes are awful. They make you laugh. Everything about you makes me laugh." Eleanor leaned forward and kissed him. "Thank you, Daniel, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "Always," he said. "Now come on. You've got a story to read." The children gathered around Eleanor in the library. The same library where Margaret Ashford had once hosted her book clubs for society women who never actually read books. Now it was filled with kids sitting on beanbags and blankets, their eyes wide with anticipation. "What story do you want to hear?" Eleanor asked. "Tell us a real story," one of the boys called out. "Not a made-up one, a real one." "A real one?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "Okay, I'll tell you a real one." She settled into a chair and looked at the faces watching her. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had everything. Money, a big house, a fancy title. But she wasn't happy, because the people she lived with didn't love her. They were cruel to her. They made her feel small and worthless. The children were silent, listening intently. One day, those cruel people hurt her very badly. They threw her away like she was garbage. And she was so angry, angrier than she had ever been in her life. She wanted to hurt them back. She wanted them to feel the same pain they had made her feel. "Did she?" Maya asked. "She did.
She used her power to make them suffer. And for a little while, it felt good. It felt like justice. Eleanor paused. But then something happened. She realized that hurting them wasn't making her happy. It was making her into someone she didn't want to be. Someone hard and cold and cruel, just like the people who had hurt her. What did she do? She made a choice. She chose to stop hurting them. She chose to let go of the anger. And she started to build something new, not a monument to revenge, but a place where people could heal, a place where kids who had been forgotten could find hope. Eleanor looked around the library, at the children watching her, at Daniel standing in the doorway with tears in his eyes. That woman learned something important, Eleanor said. She learned that the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. The best revenge is building a life so beautiful that the pain of the past can't touch you anymore. She smiled at the children, and she lived happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood what really mattered. Maya raised her hand. Miss Eleanor? Yes, Maya? Is the woman in the story you? Eleanor laughed. What do you think? Maya nodded solemnly. I think it's you, and I think you're very brave. Thank you, Maya. I'm trying to be. Later that night, after the children had been tucked into their beds in the dormitory wing, Eleanor walked through the empty ballroom. She stopped at the spot where the Ashford family's Thanksgiving table had once stood. The spot where Margaret had thrown divorce papers at her chest. The spot where her old life had ended and her new life had begun. You look like you're a million miles away. Daniel joined her, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. Just remembering, Eleanor said, accepting one of the glasses. Good memories or bad? Both. She took a sip. Isn't it strange? A year ago, this room was the worst place in the world for me. And now it's one of my favorites. That's what healing looks like, Daniel said. Taking the places that hurt you and filling them with something better. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Daniel said. You can ask me anything. Do you ever regret it, letting the Ashfords go? Stopping the revenge? Eleanor thought about the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times over the past year. No, she said finally. I regret that I ever started it. I regret the months I spent being cruel to them. But stopping? Letting go? That was the best decision I ever made. Even though they never really paid for what they did? They paid, Daniel. Maybe not the way I originally wanted, but they paid. Eleanor set down her wineglass. Margaret lost everything she cared about. Her status, her reputation, her social standing. Jonathan lost his marriage, his company, and any chance of being the man his mother wanted him to be. They're going to spend the rest of their lives living with the consequences of how they treated people. And you? I'm going to spend the rest of my life building something good. Eleanor turned to face him. That's the difference. They're stuck in the past. I'm building a future. Daniel smiled. He reached into his pocket. Speaking of futures, he said. Eleanor's heart stopped. Daniel pulled out a small box. It wasn't fancy. Simple black velvet, slightly worn at the edges. It looked like something from a regular jewelry store, not the kind of diamonds she had grown up with. It was perfect. I know this is probably way too fast, Daniel said, his voice shaking slightly. And I know you've been through a terrible marriage, and you probably have all kinds of trauma around this whole thing. And I know I'm just a veterinarian from Brooklyn who can barely afford rent and definitely can't afford the lifestyle you grew up with. Daniel, but I love you, Eleanor. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love the way you cry at shelter adoption days. I love the way you fought through the darkness and came out kinder instead of harder. He opened the box. Inside was a simple diamond ring. Small, but beautiful. I don't have much to offer you. Just a tiny apartment, a bunch of rescue animals, and a lifetime of bad jokes and unconditional love. Eleanor was crying now. She couldn't help it. Is that a yes?
Daniel asked hopefully. Or are those sad tears? I really can't tell.
You idiot, Eleanor laughed through her tears. Yes, yes, it's a yes.
Daniel's face split into the biggest grin she had ever seen. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like wine and promises and forever.
I love you, Eleanor whispered against his lips.
I know, Daniel said. I love you too. They stood there in the ballroom, holding each other, surrounded by the ghosts of a past that no longer had any power over them. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The wedding was small, intimate, perfect. They held it at the animal shelter, surrounded by dogs and cats and the volunteers who had become their extended family. Eleanor wore a simple white dress. Daniel wore a suit that actually fit, though he insisted on keeping his cat-themed socks. William Harrington walked his daughter down the aisle, tears streaming down his face. "Your mother would have loved him," William whispered as they approached the altar.
I know,
Eleanor whispered back.
That's how I knew he was the one.
The ceremony was short and sweet. They wrote their own vows. "I promise to love you even when you steal the covers," Daniel said. "I promise to support your dreams, even when they're bigger than I can imagine. I promise to make you laugh when you're sad and hold you when you're scared. And I promise to never, ever let you forget how extraordinary you are." Eleanor wiped her eyes before speaking. "I promise to love you for exactly who you are, a kind, ridiculous, wonderful man who sees the best in everyone. I promise to build a life with you that's full of joy and purpose and rescued animals. I promise to choose you every day, even when it's hard. And I promise to always remember that real love isn't about power or status or proving anything to anyone. Real love is just two people choosing to be soft with each other in a hard world." They exchanged rings. They kissed. The dogs barked in celebration, and Eleanor Harrington, now Eleanor Mitchell, began the next chapter of her life. 6 months after the wedding, Eleanor received an unexpected letter. It arrived at the shelter, addressed to her by name. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. She opened it alone, sitting in Daniel's tiny office, surrounded by pictures of adopted animals. "Dear Eleanor, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need to say some things that I should have said a long time ago. I was wrong about you. Not just wrong, cruel, petty, and small. I treated you like an obstacle instead of a person. I let my son treat you like a servant. I spent 4 years making your life miserable because I was threatened by your kindness and intimidated by your intelligence. The truth is, you were always better than us. Not because of your father's money. I didn't even know about that until the end. But because of who you are as a person. You had grace and dignity that I never possessed. You had the ability to love unconditionally, something I never learned how to do. When you made us work as servants, I was furious. I thought it was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. But looking back, I realize you were teaching us something important. You were showing us what it felt like to be treated the way we treated you. And then you stopped. You let us go. You gave Jonathan a second chance. You started a foundation that helps kids who had nothing. I don't understand that kind of mercy. I was raised to believe that you destroy your enemies completely, that showing kindness to people who hurt you is weakness. But watching you from afar this past year, I've started to wonder if maybe I was wrong about that too. You built something beautiful, Eleanor, something that will outlast all of us. And you did it not by stepping on people, but by lifting them up. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you have a wonderful life. You deserve it. Margaret Ashford. Eleanor read the letter 3 times. Then she put it in her desk drawer and went back to work. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The letter wasn't asking for forgiveness. It was acknowledging the truth. And sometimes, that acknowledgement was enough. That evening, Eleanor told Daniel about the letter. "Wow," he said. "Margaret Ashford actually apologized. I didn't think she was capable of that." "Neither did I." "How do you feel?" Eleanor thought about it. A year ago, she would have felt vindicated. She would have wanted to frame the letter and hang it on her wall as proof of her victory. Now she just felt tired. And a little sad. "I feel like it doesn't matter anymore," she said. "I spent so long wanting them to understand what they did to me, wanting them to feel sorry. But now that it's happened," she shrugged, "it doesn't change anything. It doesn't give me back those 4 years. It doesn't undo the pain. So what does matter?" Eleanor looked around the tiny apartment they shared. At the rescue cat sleeping on the couch. At the photographs on the wall. Their wedding, the shelter, the kids from the foundation. At Daniel, watching her with patient, loving eyes. "This matters," she said. "Building a life that means something. Helping people who need help. Loving someone who loves me back." She smiled. "The Ashfords are part of my past, but they don't get to define my future. Not anymore." Daniel pulled her into a hug. "Have I told you lately that you're my favorite person?" "You told me this morning." "Well, I'm telling you again." He kissed the top of her head. "You're my favorite person, Eleanor Mitchell, and I'm grateful every day that those idiots threw you away. Because if they hadn't, I never would have found you." Eleanor laughed. "That's a terrible thing to be grateful for." "It's the truth." Daniel pulled back and looked at her. "Everything you went through, the pain, the betrayal, the revenge, the healing, it made you who you are. And who you are is extraordinary." Eleanor thought about all of it. The divorce papers on the turkey, the phone call in the snow, the helicopter ride to Manhattan, the months of revenge, the moment she chose to stop, the children's faces at the foundation, Daniel's proposal in the ballroom, the wedding at the shelter, Margaret's letter. All of it, woven together into a story she never could have predicted. "Do you know what I've learned?" she said. "What?" "I've learned that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full of love and purpose that the people who hurt you become nothing but a footnote, a chapter you've outgrown, a darkness you walked through on your way to the light." She looked out the window at the city lights. "The Ashfords tried to break me. They threw me away like garbage on Thanksgiving night. They thought they were ending my story." Eleanor smiled. "They were wrong. They were just turning the page." 2 years after that fateful Thanksgiving, Eleanor stood at the podium of the Catherine Harrington Center for Young Scholars, looking out at a sea of graduates. These were the first students to complete the full scholarship program. 50 young people from backgrounds that should have held them back. Kids who had been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, connected enough to succeed. Kids like the woman Eleanor had once pretended to be. "When I started this foundation," Eleanor said, "I thought I was doing it to prove something, to show the world that I wasn't the ice queen the tabloids made me out to be, to make up for the mistakes I had made." She paused, looking at the faces watching her. "But you taught me something. You taught me that this was never about me. It's about you, your dreams, your potential, your futures." She gripped the podium. "The world is going to tell you that you don't belong, that you're not enough, that people like us don't get to succeed. But I'm standing here today as proof that those voices are wrong. I was told I didn't belong. I was thrown away by people who thought they were better than me. And here I am." Eleanor smiled. "So here's what I want you to remember. You are not defined by where you come from.
You are not limited by what people think of you. You are not your failures, your setbacks, or your darkest moments. You are who you choose to become. She looked at Daniel in the front row, holding their 6-month-old daughter, Catherine Rose, at her father, wiping tears from his eyes, at the 50 graduates who were about to change the world. Go out there and build lives that matter. Be kind to people who are unkind to you. Help those who can't help themselves. And when life knocks you down, and it will, get back up. Not with anger, not with revenge, with grace. Eleanor took a breath. Because in the end, the only thing that matters isn't how many enemies you destroyed. It's how many lives you touched. How much love you gave. How much good you put into a world that desperately needs it. She raised her hand in a wave. Congratulations, class of 2026. Now go change the world. The applause was deafening. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had gone home, Eleanor stood alone in the ballroom one last time. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago. Broken, angry, lost. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and the healing, the revenge and the forgiveness, the darkness and the light. She thought about her mother's letter, tucked safely in a drawer at home. Be brave, my darling. Be soft. Be kind. Eleanor smiled. She had been brave. She had learned to be soft. And she had discovered that kindness wasn't weakness. It was the greatest strength of all. The Ashfords had tried to destroy her. They had failed. The tabloids had called her the Ice Queen. They were wrong. The world had told her she didn't belong, but she had built her own place in it. Eleanor Harrington Mitchell walked out of the ballroom and into the arms of her husband and daughter. Behind her, the past faded like snow in spring. Ahead of her, a future full of love and purpose waited. She had wanted to be loved for herself. She had been broken, rebuilt, and transformed. And in the end, she had found something better than revenge. She had found home.